I knew it was a bad idea the second Isaiah climbed into my bed. Not because there wasn't enough room. We'd done this before after movie nights or late gaming sessions when neither of us felt like driving home at 3 in the morning. It wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the way he looked at me that night. Too quiet. Too focused. Matthew tossed his phone onto the nightstand and leaned back against the pillows with a tired sigh. "You're staring again." Isaiah smirked without even trying to deny it. "Maybe you're just pretty." "Jesus," I muttered, laughing nervously. "What's wrong with you tonight?" "Can't sleep." Rain tapped softly against the windows of my apartment, the whole room washed in dim orange light from the street lamps outside. It was late enough that the city had mostly gone quiet. Too quiet. Isaiah rolled onto his side facing me while I stayed flat on my back staring at the ceiling. "You ever think too much at night?" he asked. "All the time. Like, dangerously too much." I glanced at him. "That sounds healthy." "I'm serious." His voice had dropped lower. "Honest." That got my attention. Isaiah was usually impossible to pin down emotionally. He joked through everything, flirted through everything. Even when he was exhausted, there was always this easy confidence about him that made people gravitate toward him. But not tonight. Tonight, he looked restless. "What's on your mind?" I asked quietly. He exhaled through his nose. "Do you ever feel lonely even when you're around people constantly?" The question hung there for a second. "Yeah," I admitted. "Same." Silence settled between us again, but it felt heavier now. I could hear his breathing. Slow. Uneven. Then he laughed softly to himself. "This is probably the most emotionally honest conversation I've had in months." "That's kind of depressing." "It really is." I smiled faintly. Isaiah shifted closer, just enough that our shoulders brushed accidentally. Neither of us moved away. "I went on a date last week," he said suddenly. "Oh, what happened?" "He spent 20 minutes talking about crypto." I snorted. "Tragic." And then he asked if I'd ever considered starting a podcast. "Okay. Yeah, you should have left immediately." I almost did. His grin faded slowly after that. "But honestly," he hesitated. "I think I knew before the date even started that I wasn't going to feel anything." I turned my head toward him. "Why go then?" Isaiah stared at the ceiling for a second before answering. "Because I keep trying to force myself to want the right things." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. The room suddenly felt smaller. "What does that mean?" I asked carefully. He looked at me then, directly. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Isaiah said quietly, "I don't think I've been honest with myself about a lot of things." My heartbeat started picking up for no reason I wanted to admit. "Isaiah, you know what's funny?" he interrupted softly. "You're the only person I actually feel calm around." I swallowed hard. He kept looking at me like he was trying to decide whether to cross a line he'd been standing near for a long time. "You ever wonder why neither of us dates anyone seriously?" he asked. "I mean college, work, life. That's not the reason." His voice barely rose above the rain outside. I sat up slightly against the headboard. "Then what is the reason?" Isaiah's eyes flicked down to my mouth for the briefest second before returning to my eyes. And suddenly I couldn't breathe normally anymore. "Because every time somebody gets close to me," he said quietly, "they're not you." The words hit me like a punch. I stared at him, completely frozen. Isaiah let out a nervous laugh and dragged a hand through his messy dark hair. "See? This is why I shouldn't talk at night." "You mean that?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked away for a second, jaw tight. "Yeah," he admitted. The tension between us became unbearable after that. Every tiny movement felt amplified. His knee brushing mine under the blanket. The sound of his breathing. The way his eyes kept dropping to my lips like he was trying not to. I'd thought about Isaiah before, more times than I ever let myself admit. But hearing him say it out loud changed everything. "I didn't know," I said quietly. "I know. Why didn't you tell me?" He smiled weakly. "Because losing you would destroy me." That did it. Something in my chest cracked open all at once. I reached for him before I could overthink it, my hand catching his wrist gently. Isaiah looked down at where I touched him, then back up at me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. And then, barely above a whisper, he asked, "Matt, if I kissed you right now, would you stop me?" Isaiah's eyes stayed locked on mine while the question hung between us. "Matt, if I kissed you right now, would you stop me?" My throat went dry instantly. Every logical thought in my head disappeared at once, replaced by the overwhelming awareness of how close he was. The rain outside. The warmth under the blankets. His hand still trapped loosely beneath mine. I should have said something. Instead, I shook my head. Just barely. Isaiah stared at me for half a second longer like he was making sure I meant it. Then he moved. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. The moment his lips touched mine, something inside me snapped tight. It wasn't rough or desperate at first. Just warm. Careful. Almost nervous. But the second I kissed him back, I felt the way his entire body reacted. Like he'd been holding himself together for weeks. Maybe longer. Isaiah exhaled shakily against my mouth before kissing me harder, one hand sliding up into my hair while the other gripped the blanket near my waist. And honestly, I completely lost my mind a little. Because this was Isaiah, my best friend. The guy who stole my hoodies and ate my food and made fun of my playlists. The guy I'd accidentally fallen for without ever planning to. And now he was kissing me like he'd wanted it forever. He whispered against my lips. I felt my stomach tighten hard at the sound of his voice like that. We pulled apart just enough to breathe, foreheads resting together. Neither of us spoke for a second. Then Isaiah laughed softly under his breath, completely stunned. Okay. Wow. I couldn't stop smiling nervously. Yeah. He shook his head once. That was definitely not what friends do. I snorted quietly. His thumb brushed against my jaw absent-mindedly, and the look in his eyes nearly destroyed me right there. You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that, he admitted. My heart slammed hard against my ribs. How long? Isaiah groaned dramatically and dropped his face briefly against my shoulder. Do you want the honest answer or the less terrifying answer? The honest one. He looked back up at me slowly. Since last year. I blinked. Last year? Yeah. Isaiah. I know. He interrupted quickly, laughing at himself. Trust me, I know how insane that sounds. I stared at him in disbelief. All at once little moments started replaying in my head differently. The late-night drives. The random touches. The way he always found excuses to stay over instead of going home. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. You seriously hid that for a year? I asked quietly. You were worth keeping. That answer hit way too hard. I looked away for a second because I genuinely didn't know what to do with the feeling spreading through my chest. Isaiah noticed immediately. Hey. His voice softened. Talk to me. I swallowed once before admitting. I thought I was imagining it. The tension. Yeah. He laughed under his breath. Matt, I almost lost my mind when you sat in my lap at that party last semester. I stared at him. You told me to sit there. Because I was drunk and stupid. You looked completely calm. I was fighting for my life internally. That made me laugh harder than it should have. Isaiah smiled watching me, but there was still nervousness underneath it now. Real vulnerability. Like he still expected this to disappear somehow. Then his expression softened. You know what the worst part is? He murmured. What? I kept trying to date other people hoping it would make this go away. My chest tightened painfully. But every single time, he continued quietly, I'd end up comparing them to you. The room felt impossibly small now. Warm. Dangerous. I looked at him for a long second before finally asking the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind all night. Are you scared? Isaiah smiled faintly. Terrified. Good, I admitted. Me too. Something about that seemed to relax him. He moved closer again until our legs tangled together naturally beneath the blankets. This time neither of us pretended not to notice. Then, quieter now, he asked. So what happens tomorrow? Isaiah's question lingered between us. So what happens tomorrow? I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized neither of us had thought that far ahead. We'd spent so long pretending this wasn't there that actually crossing the line felt unreal. I don't know, I admitted honestly. Isaiah smiled faintly. Cool. Very comforting answer. I laughed quietly, tension easing just enough to let me breathe again. But he didn't move away. If anything, he got closer. His arms slid around my waist beneath the blankets, slow enough that I could have stopped him if I wanted to. Instead, I melted into the warmth of him automatically, my forehead brushing his. The closeness felt dangerous now that everything was out in the open. Every tiny thing mattered. His fingers against my side. The way his breath hitched when I touched his chest. The look in his eyes every time I glanced at his mouth. I can't believe this is real, he whispered suddenly. Yeah. I've replayed this in my head so many times it feels fake. Something twisted painfully in my chest. I reached up instinctively, brushing my fingers through the dark curls at the back of his neck. Isaiah closed his eyes for half a second like the touch affected him more than he expected. You know what's embarrassing? He murmured. What? I came over tonight fully planning not to say anything. I grinned. You failed. Horribly. His smile faded into something softer after that. I was scared you'd look at me differently. I do look at you differently now. Isaiah's expression flickered nervously, but then I leaned forward and kissed him again. Slow this time. Intentional. The sound he made against my mouth was quiet, but wrecked me completely. His hand tightened slightly at my waist as he kissed me back harder, all the restraint from earlier slipping little by little. The chemistry between us that we'd ignored for months suddenly had nowhere to go. It flooded everything. You have no idea what you do to me, he whispered against my lips. I felt heat rush straight to my face. Isaiah. No, seriously. He laughed shakily. Matt, you smile at me, and I forget how to function. That's dramatic. It's true. I tried to answer, but he kissed me again before I could. This one lingered longer. Warmer. By the time we pulled apart, my pulse was completely out of control. Isaiah looked just as affected as I felt. Hair messy, lips red, eyes darker than before. And somehow that realization made the tension even worse. He noticed me staring and smirked slightly. What? Nothing. You're looking at me like you want to say something. I hesitated, then decided if tonight was about honesty, I might as well be honest too. I think I've wanted this longer than I admitted to myself. Isaiah went very still. Yeah. I nodded once. The look he gave me after that almost hurt, like relief mixed with disbelief. Then he laughed quietly under his breath and buried his face against my shoulder for a second. You're actually gonna kill me. Why? Because if I'd known that sooner, I would have kissed you months ago. I smiled into his hair despite myself. Outside, rain continued tapping softly against the windows while the room stayed warm and dark around us. Neither of us seemed interested in sleeping anymore. Isaiah tilted his head up slightly, eyes meeting mine again. Then, quieter now, almost careful, he asked, Can I tell you something really bad? Isaiah's voice dropped lower. Can I tell you something really bad? I smiled nervously. That depends how bad. His fingers traced absent patterns against my side under the blanket, and I felt every single movement. I think, he said slowly. Part of me knew I was screwed the first time you fell asleep on me. I blinked. What? He laughed quietly at my expression. It was after that concert downtown, remember? You were exhausted, and we took the train back because your car battery died. I did remember. Barely. Mostly flashes of neon lights and loud music and leaning against him because I was half asleep. You passed out on my shoulder. Isaiah continued softly, watching me carefully. And I remember sitting there thinking, this feels way too natural. Something warm twisted in my chest. You never said anything. I was trying very hard to be normal about it. You failed at that too? Horribly, he admitted. I laughed quietly, but it faded when I noticed the way he was looking at me again. Too soft. Too honest. The kind of look that made my stomach flip over itself. You know what really killed me though, he murmured. What? The little things. His thumb brushed slowly against my waist as he spoke. The way you always steal my hoodies even though you have your own. That's because yours are better. I know. He smiled. Or when you get tired and your voice gets quieter. He paused. Or when you laugh so hard you grab onto people without realizing it. Heat rushed into my face immediately. You notice too much. I notice everything about you. That nearly ended me on the spot. The room felt warmer every second we stayed like this tangled together in the dark. Isaiah shifted closer until there was basically no space left between us at all. I could feel his heartbeat now. Fast. Mine probably wasn't any better. You're staring again, I whispered. Can you blame me? I tried to answer casually, but my voice came out rougher than intended. Little bit. He grinned against my shoulder. Then his expression softened again. I'm serious though, he said quietly. I don't think I've ever wanted anyone the way I want you. The honesty in his voice hit harder than anything else tonight. No games. No flirting to hide behind. Just Isaiah, nervous and vulnerable and looking at me like I mattered. I swallowed hard before asking softly, What exactly do you want? For a second, he just looked at me. Then his hand slid slowly up my back beneath my shirt, warm against my skin, and his voice dropped almost to a whisper. You really want me to answer that honestly? Isaiah held my gaze for a long moment after that. You really want me to answer that honestly? I nodded slowly. His hand stayed against my back beneath my shirt, warm enough to make it impossible to think straight. Okay, he said quietly. Honestly, I swallowed. I want this. His eyes searched mine carefully. I want you close to me like this all the time. My chest tightened immediately. I want to wake up next to you without pretending it's accidental. A small, nervous smile crossed his face. I want to kiss you whenever I feel like it instead of thinking about it for months. Every word made my heartbeat worse. And, he added softly, I want you to stop looking at me like you're scared I'll disappear. That one hit hard, because he noticed everything. I looked away for a second, trying to calm down, but Isaiah gently touched my jaw and turned my face back toward him. Hey, I'm trying to process, I admitted. Fair. I laughed under my breath, but it came out shaky. The truth was, I'd spent so much time burying whatever this was that hearing him say it out loud felt overwhelming in the best possible way. Isaiah's thumb brushed lightly across my cheek. You know what's crazy? He murmured. What? I thought telling you would ruin everything. It kind of did. His expression fell instantly. Matt. In a good way. I interrupted quickly, smiling. Relief washed over his face so visibly that I couldn't help laughing. You're evil, he muttered. You survived. Barely. I kissed him again before he could complain more. This time Isaiah responded immediately, one hand sliding into my hair while the other pulled me closer against him beneath the blankets. The kiss deepened naturally, slower and heavier now, charged with all the tension we'd been sitting on for months, maybe longer. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing harder than before. Isaiah rested his forehead against mine and laughed softly to himself. We are absolutely not sleeping tonight. Definitely not. Outside, the rain kept falling steadily against the windows while the room stayed dim and warm around us. And for the first time in a long time, neither of us felt lonely anymore. Isaiah stayed close to me after that, his arms still wrapped around my waist like he didn't trust this was real yet. Honestly, neither did I. The room had gone quiet except for the rain outside and our uneven breathing. My head was spinning in the best possible way. You know what I just realized? Isaiah murmured against my shoulder. What? We're going to be unbearably annoying now. I laughed softly. You're assuming this works out. He pulled back just enough to look at me, offended. Excuse me? After all that emotional vulnerability. I'm kidding. You better be. The smile faded slowly from his face, though, replaced by something more careful. Matt. Yeah. His fingers tightened slightly at my side. Can I ask you something without you freaking out? That depends. Isaiah rolled his eyes. You're so dramatic. Says you. He leaned closer again until our noses almost brushed. When did you know? He asked quietly. I hesitated, because the honest answer felt embarrassing now. There wasn't one moment, I admitted slowly. It just kind of happened. Isaiah listened silently. I started noticing stupid things, I continued. Like how I always looked for you first in a room. Or how everything felt more fun when you were there. I smiled weakly. Then one day I realized I was comparing everybody to you. The look on his face after that nearly destroyed me. You compared people to me? He asked softly. All the time. Matt. I know. He stared at me for another second before suddenly pulling me into him again with a quiet groan. That's so unfair. What is? You saying things that make me want to kiss you every 5 seconds. I laughed into his chest. But then his hand slid slowly up my back again beneath my shirt, and my laughter died immediately. The shift in tension between us was instant. Isaiah noticed too. His eyes darkened slightly as he looked at me, his voice lower now. See? That look right there. What look? The one you get when you're nervous. I'm not nervous. You're lying. I opened my mouth to argue, but he kissed me before I could. Slow at first, then deeper when I kissed him back harder without thinking. A quiet sound escaped his throat, and I felt it everywhere. The chemistry between us had stopped feeling hypothetical a long time ago. Now it felt overwhelming. Months of tension finally collapsing all at once. Isaiah pulled back just enough to breathe, forehead resting against mine again. If we keep doing that, he whispered, slightly breathless, I'm not going to be able to think straight. I blinked once, pretty sure that ship already sailed. He laughed hard enough to hide his face briefly against my neck. Then, softer this time, he murmured, You have no idea how happy I am right now. I barely slept. Not because the bed was uncomfortable or because Isaiah moved around too much. Honestly, he barely moved at all. Most of the night, we stayed tangled together under the blankets, drifting in and out of conversation like neither of us wanted the moment to end. But eventually exhaustion caught up to us. The next thing I knew, pale morning light was spilling through the blinds. and Isaiah was still holding me. For a second, I didn't move. His arm was wrapped around my waist, his face half buried against my shoulder, warm breath brushing softly against my neck. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, leaving the room quiet except for the distant sound of traffic outside. Everything felt strangely calm. Then Isaiah shifted slightly behind me and groaned quietly. "Please tell me last night actually happened." I laughed under my breath. "Morning to you too." He tightened his arm around me immediately. "So it did happen." "It did." "Good." His voice was rough with sleep. I was about to have a breakdown. I turned carefully to face him, and the second our eyes met, his expression softened in a way I'd never seen before. Not flirtatious, not teasing, just happy. It hit me embarrassingly hard. Isaiah brushed messy hair away from his face before mumbling, "You're staring again." "I think I'm allowed now." "That's fair." He smiled sleepily, and before I could think too much about it, I leaned forward and kissed him again. Morning kisses felt different. Slower, softer, more dangerous somehow. Isaiah made a quiet sound against my mouth and pulled me closer instantly, like he'd already gotten used to touching me during the night and didn't want to stop. When we finally pulled apart, he stayed close enough that our noses still brushed. "This is insane," he whispered. "A little. We have class tomorrow." I snorted. "Thanks for bringing us back to reality." "Sorry." He grinned. "Just trying to process the fact that my best friend kissed me 6 times last night." "Was it 6? You think I wasn't counting?" I laughed harder than I should have. God, he looked good in the morning. Tired eyes, messy dark curls, hoodie half slipping off one shoulder. It honestly felt unfair. Isaiah noticed me looking again and smirked. "You're doing it right now." "Shut up." "Nope." I suffered in silence for months. This is my reward. I rolled my eyes, but heat rushed into my face anyway. The teasing only lasted another minute before the mood shifted again. Not bad, just quieter. Isaiah's fingers traced lightly against my wrist while he stared down at the blankets for a second. "What?" I asked softly. He hesitated, then finally admitted, "I'm scared this gets weird." My chest tightened immediately. "Weird how?" "Like," he exhaled slowly. "What if we mess this up? What if things change and we can't go back?" There it was. The fear both of us had been avoiding. I stayed quiet for a second before answering honestly. "I think things already changed." Isaiah looked up at me carefully. "And?" he asked. "And I don't want to go back." The relief on his face was immediate. He leaned forward without warning and pressed his forehead against mine with a quiet laugh. "You seriously need to stop saying things like that." "Why?" "Because I'm trying very hard not to completely lose my mind." I smiled despite myself. Then his stomach growled loudly enough to ruin the moment entirely. We both froze. Isaiah closed his eyes in shame. "I'm leaving the country." I burst out laughing. "Matt, I'm serious. Forget everything emotional that just happened." "No chance. This is humiliating." "You're dramatic." "I'm starving." That part, at least, was normal. So an hour later, we were standing barefoot in my kitchen, making terrible coffee and burnt pancakes, while pretending our lives hadn't completely changed overnight. Except they had. Every little thing felt different now. The way Isaiah brushed against me while reaching into the cabinet. The way his hands settled automatically on my lower back when I passed him a plate. The way we kept catching each other smiling for absolutely no reason. At one point, he looked over from the stove and said quietly, "You know we're going to have to tell people eventually, right?" I nearly choked on coffee. "Can we survive breakfast first?" Isaiah laughed, but I could tell the thought made him nervous too. Not ashamed, just nervous. This was real now. And somehow that became even more obvious when there was a sudden knock at my apartment door. Both of us froze instantly. Isaiah looked at me. I looked at him. Then my phone lit up on the counter with a message from Dylan. "You awake?" "I'm outside, bro." Isaiah whispered one horrified word. Isaiah looked genuinely panicked for the first time since last night. I grabbed my phone off the counter so fast I nearly dropped it. Another message from Dylan appeared immediately. "Bro, why are you ignoring me? I know you're home." Isaiah whispered, "Tell him you're not here. He literally knows I'm here." "Okay, good point." Another knock echoed through the apartment. Louder this time. I looked at Isaiah standing there in my oversized hoodie and sweatpants, hair completely wrecked, lips still slightly pink from kissing me 10 minutes earlier, and almost started laughing from stress alone. "This is your fault somehow," I muttered. "My fault," Isaiah whispered back. "You kissed me first this morning. Because you were staring at me. I'm literally in love with you." "Matthew, What did you expect? That sentence hit me so hard I forgot the panic for half a second. Then Dylan knocked again. Matthew, his voice called through the door. If you died, I'm stealing your air fryer. Isaiah buried his face in his hands. We are so screwed. I tried to calm down enough to think straight. Dylan was one of our closest friends, which normally wouldn't be a problem except for the fact that Isaiah and I apparently looked guilty about existing right now. You act normal, I whispered. You act normal. I always act normal. Isaiah gave me a look. You absolutely do not. Another knock. Bro. I exhaled hard and headed for the door before Dylan broke it down himself. The second I opened it, he narrowed his eyes suspiciously. You look insane. Good morning to you too. Dylan stepped inside holding an iced coffee and immediately stopped walking. His eyes moved past me, straight to Isaiah, who was standing in my kitchen very obviously wearing my clothes. Silence. Long silence. Then Dylan blinked once. Oh, he said slowly. Nobody spoke. I could physically feel Isaiah dying behind me. Dylan looked between us again, taking in the tension, the matching exhausted faces, the fact that Isaiah's hand still rested on the kitchen counter next to mine like he forgot to move it. Then a slow grin spread across his face. Oh my God, he whispered dramatically. No way. Keep your voice down, Isaiah hissed instantly. Dylan pointed at both of us like he'd just solved a murder case. I knew something was wrong with you too. There's nothing wrong with us, I said too quickly. That was the straightest sentence ever, Dylan replied dryly. Isaiah actually laughed despite himself, then immediately covered his face again. Dylan dropped onto one of the kitchen stools looking deeply satisfied with himself. How long? He demanded. We literally figured this out last night, I admitted. Last night. Dylan nearly choked on his coffee. You mean I had to watch unresolved tension for 2 years, and you idiots only figured it out now? Isaiah groaned loudly. Please stop saying words. No, absolutely not. Dylan looked delighted. This is the best day of my life. I leaned against the counter, trying unsuccessfully not to smile. Honestly, the fact that Dylan wasn't making it weird made the panic disappear faster than expected. Still, Isaiah looked overwhelmed. Dylan noticed too. His expression softened slightly as he looked at us both. So you guys okay? The question landed differently. Because beneath all the teasing, he was serious. Isaiah glanced at me before answering quietly. Yeah. And surprisingly, I'm in it too. For the first time since last night, things actually felt real in a way that didn't terrify me. Dylan nodded slowly like he understood more than he was saying. Then, naturally, he ruined the emotional moment immediately. So which one of you confessed first? Isaiah pointed at me. Him. I stared at him. That is literally not true. You kissed me first. You asked if I wanted to kiss you. You said yes emotionally with your eyes. Dylan slapped the counter laughing. Oh, this is going to be unbearable. I grabbed a pancake and threw it at him. He dodged easily. Violence already? Dylan grinned. Damn, you guys move fast. Isaiah laughed harder this time, finally relaxing enough to lean against me naturally without thinking about it. The second he realized what he'd done, he froze slightly. But nobody reacted negatively. Nobody made it weird. Dylan just smiled softly for half a second before looking away on purpose like he understood the moment mattered. Then his phone buzzed. Oh, he said casually. By the way, everyone's still coming tonight. Both Isaiah and I looked at him. What? I asked carefully. Dylan blinked. Game night? At your apartment? Did you forget? My stomach dropped instantly. Isaiah looked equally horrified beside me. Because suddenly the reality hit us at the exact same time. Tonight, we were supposed to spend 6 straight hours pretending nothing had changed. Game night turned into torture immediately. Not because anyone suspected anything. Honestly, that would have been easier. The real problem was Isaiah. Or more specifically, the fact that now that I knew how he felt, I suddenly noticed everything. Every glance. Every accidental touch. Every tiny smile he tried to hide from everyone except me. By 7 that evening my apartment was packed. Dylan had invited half our friend group. There were pizza boxes all over the kitchen counter, music playing too loudly from the TV, and somehow Isaiah and I were expected to behave like we hadn't spent the entire night kissing each other. It was impossible, at least for me. You're staring again, Isaiah murmured quietly while everyone argued over what game to play. He was sitting beside me on the couch, knees touching mine. I literally can't help it. That's not helping. I smirked slightly. You started this. He looked down to hide a smile. God, we were doomed. Across the room, Dylan watched both of us with the expression of somebody witnessing live entertainment. I pointed at him immediately. Stop looking at us like that. I'm looking respectfully, he replied. You absolutely are not. Isaiah laughed into his drink. That sound alone nearly distracted me enough to miss the next part entirely. Okay, teams, Lauren announced from the floor. Couples together. Silence. Immediate silence. Isaiah nearly inhaled his drink wrong beside me. Lauren blinked. What? Nothing. Both of us said way too fast. Dylan actually had to turn away because he was laughing so hard. I wanted to kill him. The night only got worse after that. Not bad worse. Just impossible worse. Because now every interaction between Isaiah and me felt charged in a way nobody else noticed. When he handed me a drink, his fingers lingered against mine for half a second too long. When I leaned over him to grab the cards from the coffee table, I felt his hand instinctively settle against my waist before he caught himself. At one point, someone made a joke that wasn't even funny, but Isaiah laughed hard enough to lean fully against my shoulder without thinking. And I swear my brain stopped functioning. Matthew, Dylan whispered from across the room. You look violently in love. Shut up. I'm serious. Your face is insane right now. I threw a pillow at him. Around midnight, people finally started leaving. One by one, the apartment emptied until it was just me, Isaiah, and Dylan helping carry empty soda cans into the kitchen. Well, Dylan announced proudly. You two survived social interaction. Barely, Isaiah muttered. Dylan looked between us knowingly before grabbing his jacket. Then, right before leaving, he paused near the door. His expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think this makes a lot of sense. Neither of us answered immediately. But after he left, the silence in the apartment felt different again. Quieter. Real. Isaiah leaned back against the kitchen counter and exhaled slowly. I thought tonight would feel terrifying. Did it? A little. He smiled faintly. But mostly it felt right. My chest tightened. He looked exhausted now. Hair messy again. Hoodie sleeves pushed up. Eyes softer than usual as he watched me across the kitchen. Then he asked quietly, Can I stay again tonight? I laughed softly. Isaiah, you practically live here already. Yeah, but this feels different. He was right. It did. Slowly, I walked over until I stood directly in front of him. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Isaiah reached for me automatically, hands settling at my waist like they belonged there. No hesitation this time. No fear. Just warmth. You know what's crazy? He murmured. What? I spent so long trying not to ruin our friendship. His smile turned softer. Turns out I was accidentally falling in love with you the whole time. That sentence hit even harder than the first confession. I kissed him before he could say anything else. And this time it felt different too. Not nervous. Not uncertain. Certain. When we finally pulled apart, Isaiah rested his forehead against mine and laughed quietly. So, he whispered, What happens tomorrow? I smiled against his lips. Tomorrow, I said softly, you take me on a real date.